what they think about you. If that's true, if you don't know who I am, then maybe your best course would be to tread lightly. Walter White. Breaking Bad. You're familiar with the terms. Employed frequently and freely, their popular meanings are sloppy yet evocative. Sociopath, psychopath, narcissist, Machiavellian, antisocial, maladjusted, disordered, pathological, incorrigible, malevolent, amoral asshole, con, degenerate, bad seed, blackheart, rogue, creeper, psycho. Dark, nasty words they don't teach at charm school. Even the ancient Greeks named you the unscrupulous. You've been called many things, but let's face it, you don't actually care. You don't naturally waste time with feelings except when trying to fathom the feelings of others in order to take control. Being called names doesn't really hurt your feelings, because you don't really have any serious feelings to begin with. To be a successful sociopath, you need to know who people imagine you are in order to effectively conceal yourself. You are not safe unless you learn to be a master deceiver. This is why we will start here, with you, and the telltale indicators used by shrinks, neuroscientists, journalists, and other nosy jerks to sniff you out. If nothing else, always remember this. Better things come to he who remains hidden. Over the past 20 years, both the American population at large and corporate culture in particular have grown increasingly sociopathic. Narcissism is up and empathy is down, which means you are in style. People are fascinated by you. Your darkest kind are like criminal rock stars, populating the television waves in endless crime dramas and historical reenactments with mesmeric, chilling verve. People believe your brightest kind are fearless creatures who run countries, command billions, and carelessly snort coke and chant heartily while beating their chests in crowded Wall Street restaurants. Everyone is obsessed with you. Now get over it. While it may be flattering that so many people have taken an interest in you, it also draws unwanted attention and scrutiny. Never bring up sociopaths. Never compare yourself to one. Even if in the moment it will make you seem cool, it's not worth it. That said, the most famous and notorious of your kind, ruthless despots, serial killers, cult leaders, are in fact working in your favor. The more visible and outlandish these sociopaths are, the more their behavior provides cover for you. Their extreme, brutal, and exotic nature will seem so very different from yours. You seem to be a relative bore and should keep it that way.
Many estimate 1 in 100 Americans is a sociopath, while others put the number closer to 1 in 25 and much more common in men than women. On this front, a reasonably accepted figure is 1 woman to every 3 men. We'll talk about why there is so much discrepancy in these numbers later, but based on any of these accounts, you are legion. Your top members are extremely successful. Some reports show 3 to 4% of senior business positions are held by psychopaths, while others show a massively skewed 20% of CEOs are psychopaths. Before you say I told you so, also understand your percentage of the population in the criminal justice system is similarly skewed to at least 16% sociopath. Given the massive number of people in the penal system, that suggests that as many as 93% of male sociopaths are in prison or on parole. That's a shit ton of you guys. Your success window is small, so you really do need to learn to play your cards right. It's a dangerous world for you. We're the 1%ers as man, the 1% that don't fit and don't care. A Hell's Angel speaking for the permanent record. Hunter S. Thompson. Hell's Angels. If you want to be difficult and go rooting through all the available statistics, you'll be able to find studies crunching out different results. Because here's the genius behind the sociopath label: no one can agree on exactly who you are. Some argue psychopaths don't exist at all, and asking them to define psychopath like asking them to define a nervous breakdown. John Ronson, author of The Psychopath Test, says, you shouldn't define people by their maddest edges. And what Tony is he's a semi-psychopath. He's a gray area in a world that doesn't like gray areas. But the gray areas are where you find the complexity. It's where you find the humanity, and it's where you find the truth. So what is a sociopath, exactly? Inexactitude and disagreement regarding your temperament provides a perfect alibi should you ever be accused of being a fucking psycho and need to defend yourself. 2 words will do: prove it. Amid this confusion is the million-dollar question: are sociopaths really becoming more prevalent? Are our breeding habits and capitalistic culture spawning more of you? Or are we diluting the brand by calling people sociopaths more easily and letting them into the club?
According to the experts, psychologists, neuroscientists, and others have been attempting to describe and diagnose your mercurial inner state with more precision for years. Psychopath is derived from the Greek word psyche or a mind, and pathos or suffering, a pandirectional screwed-up-in-the-head term that's so general it's practically meaningless. All humans are screwed up in the head in one way or another. In the late 1800s, French doctor Philippe Pinel renamed your condition manie sans délire, or mania without delusion, meaning to describe you as being without moral restraint or emotionally insane, yet able to conduct yourself without shouting at shadows and gibbering at walls. Intellectually sound, yet emotionally damaged. Now it's getting interesting. In England, the Victorians blamed the perceived increase of this condition on industrialization, capitalism, and the decline of religion. In America during the temperance and moral hygiene movements, psychopathy was seen as a vice caused by degeneracy, a kind of societal disease or moral depravity. Today, the without delusion portion of Pinel's description is considered a proper definition of being sane, and criminals who are deemed psychopaths by the court generally cannot plead a not guilty by reason of insanity. Psychopathic killers are not mad, according to accepted legal and psychiatric standards.
Open a can of worms. If you need to get a runaway conversation back under your control, there's nothing like the little prick of expansive questioning to deflate some lecturing know-it-all full of hot air and certitude. In this case, a fun line of questioning might go something like this. You? Hot, yeah. It's always fun to see how accepted norms of proper and illegal behavior have slid all around over time. I mean, cocaine used to be illegal and whores had no right to vote. What exactly is a societal disease, anyway? What does it mean? And who decides? And who chooses those deciders? Is it a government thing, a church thing, a jail thing, or a hospital thing? Does this mean society gets to call behavior it doesn't like a disease? Clearly it has in the past. In 1928, Sigmund Freud circled around a pretty modern description of yourself. Two traits are essential in a criminal: boundless egoism and a strong destructive urge. Common to both of these, and a necessary condition for their expression, is absence of love, lack of an emotional appreciation of human objects. But he left it at that. In the 1930s, people started calling you sociopaths, just to mix it up a bit. In 1941, psychiatrist Hervey Cleckley rerouted the concept of psychopath toward defining you as having an aggressive mindset intent on pursuing vivid patterns of maladjustment, which inevitably lead to criminality and disorder. In his book Mask of Sanity, he describes a psychopath as a biologic organism outwardly intact, showing excellent peripheral function, but centrally deficient or disabled in such a way that abilities cannot be utilized consistently for sane purposes or prevented from regularly working towards self-destructive and other seriously pathologic results. We'll keep excellent peripheral function, thank you. But Cleckley was apparently unaware of the large numbers of successful sociopaths in society. He underestimated the breadth and versatility of his subject.
Cleckley clarified his position in 1964, describing you as having superficial charm and good intelligence, absence of delusions and other signs of irrational thinking, absence of nervousness or other psychoneurotic manifestations, unreliability, untruthfulness and insincerity, lack of remorse or shame, inadequately motivated antisocial behavior, poor judgment and failure to learn by experience, pathologic egocentricity and incapacity for love, general poverty in major affective reactions, specific loss of insight, unresponsiveness in general, interpersonal relations, fantastic and uninviting behavior with drink and sometimes without, suicide rarely carried out, sex life impersonal, trivial, and poorly integrated, and failure to follow any life plan. In 1993, psychologist Robert D. Hare got more precise in his book Without Conscience, where he identified 6 emotional/interpersonal traits often present in psychopaths. A glib and superficial charm, egocentric and grandiose, a lack of remorse or guilt, a lack of empathy, deceitful and manipulative, a shallow emotions, and 6 expressions of social deviance: impulsive, poor behavior controls, need for excitement, lack of responsibility, early behavior problems, adult antisocial behavior. If you don't live in a cave and have ever surfed the net for articles about yourself, you already know this, so I'll keep it brief. Hare created the psychopathy checklist, or PCLR, to score a person's level or degree of psychopathy. In addition to these traits, the 20-part checklist includes pathological lying, parasitic lifestyle, promiscuous sexual behavior, early behavior problems, a lack of realistic long-term goals, many short-term marital relationships, a revocation of conditional release, a criminal versatility typically used by law enforcement shrinks. The psychopathy checklist requires a licensed professional to understand how to read a person's character.
Your score is based on their ranking of each trait. 0 does not apply. 1 applies somewhat. 2 applies fully, meaning the possible scores range from 0 to 40. Clearly, scoring a 2 on many of these would not look good for you. But once again, Hare has focused on the criminal subgroup. His test may work great in prison once you've already been busted and don't have as much at stake in hiding yourself. But if you are still on the outside, you know how to be more careful. Hare himself said, "If I weren't studying psychopaths in prison, I'd do it at the stock exchange." Well, why doesn't he go to Wall Street? He admits it's because that would be difficult. Prisoners are easy. They like meeting researchers. It breaks up the monotony of their day. But CEOs, politicians, you've heard the phrase "on the spectrum," used to deride an awkward-to-obsessive colleague, or even just a weird mouth breather. It's meant to pin the subject somewhere on the autism spectrum between mild and Rain Man. Many feel psychos similarly exist on a spectrum, with the successful sociopath falling somewhere around the 20-point mark on the Hare checklist score. Neuroscientist and self-diagnosed psychopath James Fallon says, "I believe there's a sweet spot on the psychopathy spectrum. People who are 25 or 30 on the Hare scale are dangerous, but we need a lot of 20s around. People with the chutzpah and brio and outrageousness to keep humanity vibrant and adaptable and alive." The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM-V, officially describes your condition very broadly under the umbrella of antisocial personality disorder, which is a pervasive pattern of disregard for and violation of the rights of others. Talk about pussyfooting around. You don't even get your own category. These guys don't want to commit to saying anything decisive just yet. And again, this diagnosis focuses on people caught doing destructive and illegal activity. The successful, functional sociopath is not included, pointing out there is yet to be an agreed-upon underlying disease that can be diagnosed without the presentation of socially maladaptive symptoms. All these famous studies focus only on those of you who've ended up in the big house. What about Wall Street and the White House? No matter. Leave them to their circular logic and limited vision. At least you know who they think you are.
Special case, narcissist. Of course you're a special case, because you're a narcissist. You're not a run-of-the-mill sociopath. You're obsessed with getting attention and approval from others. You have your own DSM-V entry. You need to be liked and admired as if all of life is one long-running 7th grade popularity contest. With so many of your other traits indistinguishable from those of the sociopath, I feel this book will be useful to you. I'll leave your need for attention and feed the whole hunger for constant validation at the gate and suggest you look elsewhere for advice on how to get your ego stroked. But the rest of your personality should find much useful here. Like I said, this book isn't here to draw descriptive lines in the mental sand but to focus on the problem of getting ahead. So please join us. I promise to point out a few things you are really good at along the way, so the regular Socio-Joe can learn from you, too. There has been much semantic wrestling over you as clinicians attempt to parse the broad description of sociopathy into separately named conditions. For example, the dark triad tries to separate narcissists from psychopaths from Machiavellian types by highlighting a few distinct traits. Others separate psychopaths as those who respond aggressively to physical threat from narcissists who respond aggressively to ego threat. Some study nature versus nurture, claiming that sociopaths were created by abuse while psychopaths are genetically compromised. Could there be true distinctions? Sure. But they're minor details compared to the large, dark core you all share. While psychologists have been working on definitions and semantics, neuroscientists have also been studying possible physical manifestations of psychopathy and are beginning to define who's who by mapping reduced neural activity and abnormalities in the limbic system. One of the lead researchers in this field, James Fallon, inadvertently discovered that his own brain scan contained these same psychopathic abnormalities. His friends and family readily agreed with the diagnosis, but his behavior had been non-criminal and highly functional his entire life. So where does that leave us? Like crazy or brilliant, sociopathy is a mental state which has thus far eluded a definitive, concrete, pathological diagnosis. You are a complicated creature. In defense of the shrinks, this circles back to the problem of differentiating between psychological and physiological origins. Does getting abused as a child affect your limbic system? If you have a normal brain yet pass the maladaptive personality tests with flying colors, are you still a real sociopath? What if you have the abnormal brain but act like a sweetheart? Fuck it. You don't really care. But these are all interesting questions you can tap dance around with to keep other people from pinning you down.
True confessions. I don't need to recover from anything. I am recovered. I'm a 21st century man. You see, inside all of us there is the old brain, the emotional brain, full of fear and nervousness. But wrapped around that old brain is the new mind, the rational, thinking, planning, cool modern mind. This new mind grew as humans evolved into more complex beings with more advanced societies. This new mind is a further step in evolution from the old brain, man. It is more advanced. In the sociopath, the old brain has been more effectively crushed and inhibited by this new mind than in regular people. Like a rabbit in the boa constrictor's embrace, the new mind is squeezing out the old brain. It's a further step in evolution. Eventually, the new mind will squeeze out the old brain altogether. This is why sociopaths are actually the most advanced humans on the planet. James DeWitt, stock trader. New York City, there's always an agenda. Everyone has their reason, and grant application, for pursuing category classifications and definitions to try to concretely define your mind or separate you into smaller and smaller subgroups. But we're not going to help them. For the purposes of this book, from now on you're all sociopaths. If you're an expert reading this in your tiny windowless office and getting angry, I advise you to either get over it or put the book down. This book is not for you. It's for sociopaths and other smart people who are here for a little learning, fun, and profit. Maybe think of diagnosing a sociopath as like diagnosing an alcoholic. There are hospitalized alcoholics, self-proclaimed tragic alcoholics, functional secret alcoholics, alcoholic disasters, alcohol-fueled geniuses, and heavy drinkers who don't give a shit one way or another what you call them. Anyone who tries to pigeonhole one into a particular category is as likely to get agreement as a beer bottle in the face. Similarly, maybe there are criminal sociopaths, personal life in shambles sociopaths, functional sociopaths, charismatic genius sociopaths, and none of your fucking business sociopaths.
On defense. Remember, every insult can be turned into a backhanded compliment with a gentle shift of vocabulary. Impulsive? Try unencumbered. Kevin Detton puts a useful positive spin on Hare's psychopathic traits, calling them in part charisma, focus, mental toughness, fearlessness, mindfulness, action, self-confidence, and coolness under pressure. Feel free to use these terms to correct anyone who's trying to deride you. You can also point out that Hemingway's definition of courage itself was grace under pressure. In 1977, Kathy Whittam, a researcher looking for non-criminal psychopaths in Boston, came up with these want ads, which also makes you sound pretty good. Are you adventurous? Psychologists studying adventurous, carefree people who've led exciting, impulsive lives. If you're the kind of person who'd do almost anything for a dare and want to participate in a paid experiment, send name, address, phone, and short biography proving how interesting you are. Wanted, charming, aggressive, carefree people who are impulsively irresponsible but are good at handling people and at looking after number one. Finally, Hare interviewed a psychopath who was not impressed with the checklist wording at all. He offered these much more positive interpretations. This is the kind of spin that will get you places. Glib and superficial, what is negative about articulation skills? Egocentric and grandiose, how can I attain something if I don't reach high? Deceitful and manipulative, all of us are manipulative to some degree. Isn't positive manipulation common? Impulsive can be associated with creativity, living in the now, being spontaneous and free. Poor behavioral controls, violent and aggressive outbursts may be a defensive mechanism, a false front, a tool for survival in a jungle. Need for excitement, courage to reject the routine, monotonous, or uninteresting. Living on the edge, doing things that are risky, exciting, challenging, living life to its fullest, being alive rather than dull, boring, and almost dead.
You are legendary. One of the most powerful ways you can manipulate others is through belief. Belief is the essential force you need to understand and appreciate to make this book work for you. We'll come back to this in depth later on, but for now, let's look at what average people believe about you. How you react to these common beliefs will be far more consequential to your success than any definition, statistic, or checklist. Belief: you make a great first impression. True. In psychological tests, people scoring high on Machiavellian tendencies make significant and pervasive good impressions. Viewers are more likely to describe high marks as clever, bold, ambitious, dominating, persuasive, confident, relaxed, and talented, while describing low marks as cowardly, indecisive, gullible, insecure, emotional, and unintelligent. And people like the high marks more. It is this fact, that sociopaths often make fantastic first impressions, that some experts find to be one of the most troubling findings in all of psychology. Bravo, but it's extremely important not to let this go to your head, and here's why. The effect of this initial glow tends to wear off faster than you might think. In one study, after as little as 2.5 hours of exposure, subjects who at first had a positive impression of narcissists began to negatively perceive them as self-enhancers. You need to guard the glow of your first impression. Don't get me wrong, self-enhancement can get you far, but you need to be subtle about it. You should regard this first impression advantage as something like starting a track race in the 6th lane. You begin way out ahead, but once you round the turn, people catch up, and catch on, unless you really know how to run. How to handle it: concentrate on preserving a good impression over the longer term by resisting the urge to show off once you get the gig. If you do need to preen and be a peacock about it, go do it in an empty parking lot or someplace where no one can see you, and get it out of your system. Feel free to also use this parking lot escape when you are sorely tested and tempted to punch someone in the face.
Belief: you don't feel emotions and lack empathy. True to a greater or lesser degree, depending on how sociopathic you are. You don't care about other people. That you don't feel emotion is a fact which is important to keep to yourself. Even if you strongly agree with certain statements from diagnostic tests, you should never admit that to anyone. For example, rate from 1 to 5, 1 equals strongly disagree to 5 equals strongly agree. Success is based on survival of the fittest. I am not concerned about the losers, or people who are stupid enough to get ripped off usually deserve it. If these questions aren't already obviously leading and dangerous enough to make you choke on your beer, you need to learn. No matter what you really think, never agree to clumsy and entrapping statements such as these. How to handle it: avoid cold or superior language. Don't refer to a person as pathetic or a horrible accident as fascinating. Try to avoid being outwardly mean. Take the online test at http://personality-testing.info/tests/lsrp.php and see if you can score a 5 in both primary and secondary psychopathy. Then never publicly agree with or repeat any of the statements you strongly agreed to ever again. Belief: you have a hard time reading emotions in others. Mostly false. While you don't feel emotion yourself, you find it fascinating in others and expend a great deal of effort learning to recognize and copy emotional expression. While there is some evidence you aren't great at noting expressions of fear, many tests show you are a good study and show no impairment in recognizing an emotion in others. How to handle it: keep up the good work. Correctly identifying the emotional state of another person is essential for effective manipulation. The more closely you can align your reaction to their mood, the more likely they will accept what you say. Belief: you don't suffer from guilt. People incapable of guilt usually do have a good time. Rust Cole, true detective true, but guilt isn't likely to be something HR is looking for when they're kicking your tires and checking under the hood. They'll more likely be looking for aggression, agreeableness, reliability, and fact-checking your competence. We'll get back to your lack of guilt later, once you're established and can really put it to good use.
Belief: you are more intelligent than most people. False. Sorry to say this, but if scientific tests are to be trusted, this is not the case. Across the population, your IQ is neither higher nor lower on average than everyone else's. But that doesn't matter, you're not working for an IQ test, but for malleable, biased people who will most likely perceive you as more intelligent because you feel that way yourself and aren't afraid to show it. Keep up the good work. If you're not good at something, just pretend you are. This may be stressful to some, but you'll be fine. Remember this: projecting confidence literally cannot be overestimated. Everybody says things like, fake it till you make it, and confidence trumps competence, and they are absolutely true. Studies show people who act like they know what they are talking about, even if they don't and are completely wrong in their assertions, are viewed as being literally as good at that something as someone who actually knows what he's doing. This astonishing fact is yours for the using. And in this post-truth era where fact-checking is a useless pastime for nerds, it's only going to get better from here. The secret is to assert with confidence while keeping the topics broad and steering the conversation away from the other person's expertise. Asserting yourself blindly in someone else's wheelhouse can lead to mistakes that will blow your cover. How to handle it: just keep acting like you know what you're doing. Belief: you feel entitled. True. You do think you're better than others and deserve more. But who's gonna give it to you unless you ask for it? Exceptionalism applies to you. Belief: you have no inner self. It's complicated,